Hi everyone, my name is Federico Tartarini, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can add this very nice search bar here at the top on your Docusaurus webpage. Okay, so here as you can see you have a search bar and you can search throughout the documentation for different terms, like for instance here we can look for install, or if you look at the documentation like we want to look for like headers. So let's go back here, we go in search and we look for headers, and we're going to be redirected to the part of the documentation where we want to that we want to read. Okay, so this search bar is installed by default in your Docusaurus 2 website. So Docusaurus 2 come with this search bar option that you can enable. However, and is powered by Algolia. Okay, so you're going to have two options to add this search bar to your documentation website. I'm going to show you both. One is the hard way and the complex way, which I will show you in this video, and one is the simplest way. Okay, so if you want to add it in the simplest way, you just have to go in the documentation of Docusaurus here, look for search, and you can actually use the search bar that they provide. You can look for search and using Algolia DocSearch. Okay, so if your documentation website has only documentation, you can apply for a doc search here by clicking on this link, going on docsearch.algolia.com/apply, and you can join the program. However, if your website is not purely documentation, but it only, so as you can see here, it must be a documentation website. And for instance, my website didn't comply with this requirement. Is just a documentation website, but was also advertising like one of the product that I've created, which is an open source product. But anyway, is not a did not classify for this documentation website, and therefore I could not apply, or better, I mean I applied here, but it didn't give me the API key. Okay, so if you apply here and your request goes through, everything is fine. You're going to receive two keys, which are going to show you where you need to add them, and you can skip in this video later on. So if in YouTube, you can skip later on to the section in which I'm going to explain how to add this key to your project. Alternatively, if you are like me, that you didn't comply with these guidelines, I will show you how to use Algolia. So how to create an account in Algolia, then eventually create an index, a database, and then you can still use the service. Okay. The only difference is that if you use DocSearch, they will run the code on their machine every 24 hours, as is explained here, and they will run it the crawler every 24 hours, and they will extract the content from your website. If you use the second option, like I'm going to show you, I'm going to run it on my personal computer. So the content of the website is going to be crawled every time I run that search. Otherwise, no one is stopping you to put this crawler on a cloud machine and then eventually run it as often as you want. Okay? But just to let you know, all this is for free as long as DocSearch is definitely for free because you never have to pay. Algolia, and what I'm going to show you today, has some free tiers. So you can use the free account. However, you are limited in the amount of requests that or searches that your user can do. Or if you go beyond that, so if you go beyond 10,000 search requests per month, then you will have to pay, and this is the price of their standard account. Okay, but without any further ado, let's start, and I will show you how to get started. So if you have already a Docusaurus 2 website, please start working and adding the file to your repository. Otherwise, if you want to follow along with me, you can just go on my GitHub account. You can search for Docusaurus.example for dash YouTube, and you can clone this code here on your computer, and you can test that, and you can play a bit with that, and then add it to your website as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you by adding it here to my website, so to this repository here, and I have already cloned it on my computer, and this is how it looks. Okay, I've already added all the files that we need, and we will need to change, and but I will explain everything step by step. Okay, so first, please clone this repository on your computer or follow along with your documentation, Docusaurus 2 documentation website. And the first step that we need to do is to create an account in Algolia. Okay, so if you don't have already an account, please sign up, and you just have to put your email address and your username and password. You sign up, and an application is going to be created for you. Okay, as you can see here, I have my application. Okay, it's called EDY, and this is going to be the key of the application. Okay, so after you have logged in, please go here in API keys. Okay, so this is going to be our search only API key that we are going to need to put in the configuration file of Docusaurus. This is our application ID, very important if you follow this method, because we will also have to add this to the documentation website, to the documentation config file, which this is not actually specified in Docusaurus, so it was a little bit confusing. And then we need another API key. Okay, so first let's start generating that API key. I have already done it, so this is the API key that I have created. However, I will just show you simply how to add it, because you probably don't have it. So you will have to create a new API key, and description you can say like whatever you want. Like you can say create a database, and indices, we don't have to add any indices at the moment. And then validity, we are going to put 0 because we want to be valid for a limited amount of time. Of course, you can change that. You can define the maximum number of API calls per hour. I again put 0 because I want to be unlimited, because I want to do how many calls I want. The max it query, again, you can specify that. And then HTTP refers, this doesn't really matter. The only thing that you actually need to change here is you need to add some options. So we need to add option, okay, and we can actually check it here on the documentation docsearch by Algolia. So you can go inside here, run your own, and as you can see, we need to add object, edit setting, and delete index. Okay, so let's go back here, add object, delete index, and the last one was edit settings. Okay, edit settings. Okay, so we can just create a description, add indices. Okay, so we can create this API key. Okay, and this was created just right now, and as you can see, this is our new API key. I will delete it afterwards, so I'm actually deleting the old one. I will delete also this one here, so you can actually use it to query my data. Okay, so what you need to do is this is the API key. Okay, and you will have to copy and paste it inside a configuration file. Okay, so let's go back to our directory on our computer. So inside the main file where you're going to have my website, again, if you're not familiar with the Docusaurus structure, please have a look at my previous video. So inside here, my website, inside the main directory, we are going to have two files, okay? So The first file that we need to add, and you can add it in different ways, is a .env-file, okay, in which we are going to put the application ID, okay, and I will show you how to get that, and the API key that we have just generated, okay. So let's grab this API key that we have generated. So this is our API key that we need to add to the .env file, and the application ID. The application ID is this one here, okay? So we can copy it from here. It's not the name, but is this code here. So we copy this one in the application ID, and then we are set, okay? Then what we need to do is to add a configuration website, okay? So the configuration you can copy from mine, so I will upload that on GitHub because it's specifically for Docusaurus. However, docsearch help us in finding what is the documentation for our specific website, okay? So you can go here, Docusaurus 2, and that's where I got the file from, okay? So we need to add another file. So we have added the .env file. We need to add another one which we are going to call it config.json, okay? And inside here we are going to be putting and we are going to be copying this file here that we get from this repository, okay? I will put a link in the description, but however you can always refer to my source code, which is going to be on GitHub, so just look down in the description, okay? We can just copy and paste it and everything is fine because we are going to use basically the selectors and we are going to not change the default behavior. But what you're going to be changing are you need to change just 3 things, okay? So you need to change first the index name, okay, which are going to give an index to your indices. And in my case, I call it EDY because that's the name of our documentation website. However, you can feel free to change this name as you want. You can call it example, you can call it documentation, whatever you want. You will also have to change the start URL, okay, which is going to be the URL where your website is actually deployed. So here I'm deploying it with GitHub Pages and I'm deploying it here. So yes, is live my website. At the moment there is not the search bar yet, but I will push it and then you will be able to see the search bar. And so we need to copy this URL here. Inside here, start URL, okay? And then another thing that we need to put is the sitemap URL, okay? So it's exactly the same URL, but followed by sitemap XML, okay? So this file is automatically created by Docusaurus, so you don't really have to worry about it. So if you have followed my previous tutorial on how to create a Docusaurus website, which I'm going to put the link in the description, you have already the sitemap generated, okay? So these are only the 2 things that you actually need to change in this config.json file. But again, feel free to query to copy it from my GitHub repository. Keep in mind that you, of course, will need to change the start URL and sitemap URL. Okay. So if we go back here to docsearch, we are going to need to do a couple of other things. Okay. So we have set up our environment. Okay. We have already created an Algolia account, so we have that. We have created the application, we have changed the application ID, we have changed the API key, okay? And now we need to run the crawler from the Docker image. Unfortunately, you will need to install 2 things, okay? So we'll need to install JQ on your computer, and again, you can click here. I will put a link in the description, and there is how you can install it on your computer. I'm running like Windows 10, so I use Choco here, so Chocolate, and you can just use this command here. just keep in mind that when you run, so if you use command prompt, you need to run it as an administrator. Okay, so you need to run it as an administrator, and then you can type this choco install JQ only if previously you have installed this choco. Okay, so that's basically what you need to do, and I've already installed it, so it's already installed, and I don't have to do anything. But if you haven't, just install Chocolately here. There is a you can install it on Windows, and then just click here, install now, and then you can just simply use that command to install it on your computer. The second thing that we will need to install is Docker. Okay, to install Docker, you just have to Docker install, and you can install Docker Desktop. Okay, so you can install Docker Desktop, and this is just downloaded from Docker Hub. It's going to install it on your computer, and it's going to restart your computer. So now we're all ready to go. So we have Docker installed on our computer, which we're going to need it, and we have JQ installed on our computer. Okay, the last thing that we need to do is to run that following command. So another important thing here, if you are on Windows, okay, if you want to run it on your computer, you need to have either git bash installed on your computer, because this command will not work directly into your into CMD, okay, because this cut command here is not compatible, it doesn't work in Windows. Okay, so for instance, you're going to use git bash. Technically, I'm assuming that you have already git bash installed on your computer, because if you got started with Git, you have most likely installed git bash on your computer. Okay, otherwise any other Windows terminal that you have in your computer is going to work equally fine. Okay, so let's just copy this command here, which I will try to remember to put a link in the description. Otherwise, just write a comment if I forgot to do that, and I will just add this command. So let's see what we need to do. Okay, so first of all, we need to go into the repository where we have our documentation website. Okay, so let me copy that here. So let me actually go one step back. So we're going to do cd, and we are going to cd into the documentation website. Okay, but we are going to just be in the directory which holds like my website here. And again, please refer to the other video. So we are going to cd into this repository, okay, which you have cloned alternative from GitHub, and we are going to run this command here. Okay, so let's just copy this one, and let's just copy it here. We are going to need to change a couple of things. Okay, so our environment file is called .env, and everything is fine, as you can see is here .env. Okay, but we need to change the path to the config.json file. Okay, in my case, I decided to put it here inside the directory, so we are going to need to change that. So here we are, so we can go here, we can cancel all that. So we are going to be in the ./config.json. So this is where the config.json file is. And just to remind you, the config.json is contains like the start URL, the sitemap URL, and the index. And this is defined based on Docusaurus 2. And the .env contains the API key and the application ID. Okay, so just run this. The first time you run it is going to take a little bit of time, because it's going to download on your computer the Docker file, but I've already done it, so technically it should not take that long on my computer to run. Okay, so sorry, just one second. Yeah, perfect. So is running. It says the number of hits. So this is all the URL that it has scraped. So as you can see, the main one, the docs, the tags, the intro, doc2, doc1, and these are all, just to show you, all the pages that we have here, okay? So this is docs, this is intro, this is doc1. So by following the sitemap URL that Docusaurus has already created for us, it has looked for all the H1 tags, H2 tags, H3 tags, and so forth that we have in our documentation. So it has parsed all these pages. Okay. So now, if you go back, so in mine I already had some records because I already ran this command. But if you go back to your Algolia account, now you will see that there is going to be like this index, which is ADY, and you will see this. You should see the same number of records here as you should see here, because what basically this command has done, it has parsed all the relevant information from your documentation website and it has sent it to Algolia. Okay, so now you have all your records inside here. Okay, and this is what we are going to get when we are going to do the query. As you can see, if I query for introduction, here I can look for the documents that have introduction in them. Okay, so I can search and query through the entries, through the number of records, but you don't have to do anything here. Okay, so let's go back to our documentation, Docusaurus files. We are going to need to do a couple of things. Okay, so the package.json doesn't need to change. The only file that needs to change is the docsaurus.config.js. Okay, so double click on the docsaurus.config.js file, just open it, and you will need to add these three. So you need to add these. So you need to add Algolia, okay, Algolia column, and then like these curly brackets. Inside here, we're going to have to add the API key. Just be very careful that this is not the API key that we added here in the config, no, in the .environment files. And the reason why it's not the same API key is because one API keys can actually have, you can actually use it to delete records, as you can see here, delete indexes, add objects. We don't want to expose that. Of course, we don't want to expose that, especially if our website is on a public repository, but we want to have just an API key, which is just going to be for search only, okay? So as you can see, the API key here that we have here is different from the API key that we have in .env. Are two different API keys. The first one is this one that can add objects, can delete index and edit the settings, while the second one is only for search purposes. Okay, so this is okay if it's going to be on GitHub and it's going to be exposed. No problem about that. Okay, so inside here in Docusaurus, what we need to add. So where do we need to add it? Sorry, first we need to add it inside team config. Okay, so if you look inside here module.exports, you have already team.config, so it was already there. Inside team.config, you have the navbar, you have the footer. Now you need to add also Algolia, okay? And inside here, as I mentioned, you need to add the API key. You need to add the index name, and the index name is going to be the name that you have selected in the config.json file. So the EDY in our case, but if you choose a different name, you can change that, okay? And not to be confused with the name of the app here, you need to put this one, the index name, okay? So docusaurus.config, index name. And another thing that is very important, otherwise it's not going to work, you need to add again the app ID inside over here, okay? And that's the main problem with the documentation in Docusaurus 2, that I got this code, of course, from their documentation. However, if you look inside here team config, they do not explain that you need to add the app ID. If you do not add the app ID, you will see the search bar, but it's not going to work. Actually, let me show you first that it works, and then I'm going to show you that without the app ID is not going to work. Okay. Then there are a couple of other things that you can change. For instance, which are optional, the contextual search or the Algolia search parameters. I'm not going to go too much into detail about that in this video, but you can just read here inside the documentation of Docusaurus to find out more. Okay, so now we are ready to launch our website. So we can just do you can just go here and you can do start. Okay, so let me just start our website. We can do with Docusaurus start. So in WebStorm here you have it here at the top, but sorry, let me show you actually if you want to start it from the terminal. So you can do Docusaurus and then start, and it's going to open in your browser. Okay, so sorry, no, sorry, yarn start. Okay, so you have to type yarn start, and yarn start is going to run this command. Docusaurus start is going to build it, and here we have on localhost running our documentation website. Okay, so we have our documentation website. Now we have the search bar, and actually let's look for something. So for instance, in the documentation here, we want to look for this section, markdown syntax, and then we want to look for install. So let's type for markdown syntax, enter, and then you are redirected here. And if you want to look for install, enter, you are in install. One important thing that I just showed you before is that you need to make sure that you add the app ID here, otherwise it's not going to work. Let me show you that. So if I comment out this line and I start the server again, okay, so let me just use here, start. Okay, it's going to open again in localhost. As you can see, the search bar is here, but when you type something like install, can you see nothing is happening? I mean, of course, because the search term is already there, but let's look for another search term, which in this case is lists. If I type list, nothing is coming up, okay? While if I revert back and I add this line, and then we do stop and rerun, yeah, now in search, you can look for list, and actually I even misspelled it, but it was able to find the list. Okay, so now everything is ready and we can push our changes to GitHub. Okay, so of course, what is very important is that you're not going to add these two files when you're going to push to GitHub. Okay, so for instance, here we don't want to push the config file and we do not want to push the .env-file. Okay, you can add those two files to git ignore. But what do we want to push is the Docusaurus config, the package.json, which actually has not changed here. There was no change, so actually let's revert it back. And the yarn.log file, I don't know why it changed, but yeah, nothing has nothing was let's revert it back, yeah, to the previous file. So sorry for that. I will just go back and I just okay, so here we are going to push this to GitHub, so you can also have a look at my code. Of course, in your case, you will have to add the .env and the config.json file. So I'm going to push it to GitHub, and I'm going to, yes, so is sent to GitHub, and now let me just go back to the files here. Okay, so now we go to GitHub. and we need to deploy it. Okay, so the other thing that we need to do is now the changes are here. So example YouTube, so you should see the changes like example YouTube. No, the changes have not been pushed. Okay, so I'm going to push the changes. Just very important, make sure that is still pushing. So make sure that you are not pushing the .env and the .config files. So those will not have to be there. But what need to be there is the docsaurus.config.js. That is fine. I mean, we have changed that. I know that this API key is going to be exposed, but it's just for search purposes. So it does need to be there. And the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do the deployment. So here in package.json, I can type yarn deploy. Yarn deploy is going to deploy it. Okay, so first I need to cd into my website, and then I need to do yarn deploy. Is going to deploy to okay, just 1 second that I'm going to have a look at what is the error. Okay, sorry for that. Something had changed, so I had to change a little bit the package.json file. So I've added this line of code, which I'm going to push to the GitHub repository. So don't worry about that. You just basically need to add a new command, which is going to be deploy. This can be as you want. I mean, it doesn't have to be called deploy dash GitHub pages, but just make sure that it's not called deploy, because deploy is already there. And or you could put this one inside here anyway. Just copy this one and it's fine. And then inside here, you need to add this command here. And basically you can copy from mine, but of course you need to change the GitHub user. So just remember to put your user ID inside here. So what you will need to do, you just have to do a yarn and then deploy gh pages. Okay, and yeah, so there was deploy gh pages is going to build the website. Here, as you can see, is building it for you, and is going to deploy to GitHub pages. So first is building it, and then inside here, docsaurus.example, you can see that in the activity log, now we should just deploy it another time. So it was deployed 1 minute ago, and now technically we should have a new deployment. Okay, so this is going to update, and then you can just click here on view deployment. I don't think it's going to change because I haven't actually changed anything. It's the same website, so GitHub has not detected any changes, so it's not going to show me that there is another one. But I can just show you the final website. So if you go inside here, now we have our search bar that we can actually search for the search terms. So everything is done, and everything is ready. So now this is your website. The only downside is that if you want to update these indices and these records inside here, every time you will have to come back here to your local computer, or you can run this on a cloud server, and you will have to run that command that we ran before, which I'm going to put a link in the description, which is this one, this docker run and this command here. So every time you run this one, is going to update the indices and is going to update and is going to send them to Algolia. So if you are able to use docsearch, you don't have to do all these, and they do it for you every 24 hours. But in the case of my website, basically the content doesn't change much. So it's fine that I can just run this command every time I decided to update the content of the website. It's up to you to change that. And that's basically it. The only thing that I still want to mention to you is that if you were able, so I mentioned at the beginning, if you were able to join the program here and have a documentation URL and put an email address, and docsearch says that you are eligible to be indexed by them, then eventually you don't have to add here in the documentation website this .env-file, this config.json file. They will take care of that. The only thing that you will need to do is to go in the Docusaurus.config file and add this part here. So inside team config, add this Algolia. And basically, you don't even have to put the app ID because you will not know the app ID. You will just have to put the API key, the search API key, and the index name. That's all, as is written here in the documentation website. Okay, so if you go here, the only two things that you're going to put is the API key and the index name. That's all. And of course, that is much simpler, but I just wanted to show you both options, so you are a little bit more flexible. And if you are like me, that you couldn't use their service for free, you can still use Algolia for free and allow people to search your website with the search bar. I hope you found this video interesting, and if you did, please consider liking it and subscribing to my channel. And thank you very much for listening. And please feel free to add any question or comments down below in the video. Bye bye.